You know, in all my years, I've seen people lie about a lot of things. They lie about money, they lie about affairs, they lie about where they were last Tuesday night. But it's a rare and profoundly sad thing when you meet someone who is trying to lie about their own existence. Not a detail, not an event, but the whole thing, the whole person. And when that lie becomes more real to them than the truth, you're not just dealing with deception anymore. You're dealing with a soul in crisis. I remember the day I first read the file on a young woman we'll call Jenna. The request came from her mother, Sarah, and the language she used was frantic, filled with words like delusional catfish and wasting her life. On paper, it sounded like a fairly common problem for the digital age, a kid spending too much time online, disconnected from reality. But my gut told me something was different here. The desperation in the mother's letters wasn't just about frustration, it was about fear. She felt she was losing her daughter to a ghost in the machine. When I met Jenna backstage before the show, she wasn't what I expected. She wasn't defiant in that loud, rebellious way you often see. It was a quiet defiance. She sat slumped in a chair, her shoulders curved inward as if to make herself smaller. Her eyes were fixed on a spot on the floor, and she had this wall around her so thick you could almost see it. She was 24 years old, but in that moment she looked like a lost child trying to be invisible. Her mother, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of anxious energy, pacing, wringing her hands, ready to lay out a list of grievances a mile long. The contrast was stark. One was broadcasting her pain to the world, the other was hiding hers in a fortress of silence. The central problem, as Sarah defined it, was that Jenna was living a complete fantasy life online. She had created a fake persona, a woman named Aria, who was everything Jenna was not. Aria was a successful graphic designer living in a trendy downtown loft in a city hundreds of miles away. She was witty, confident, and had a vibrant social life documented through carefully curated photos we later learned that were stolen from various public profiles. Aria had friends, she had a career, she even had an online boyfriend who believed every word of it. Meanwhile, Jenna was living in her childhood bedroom, had dropped out of community college, had no job, and had pushed away the few real-life friends she had. She spent every waking moment maintaining the elaborate fiction of Aria. To her mother, this was a case of laziness and deceit. She saw a daughter choosing a lie over the responsibilities of life. But I saw something else. I saw a retreat. This wasn't a choice made from a place of strength or malice. This was an escape born of profound inadequacy. I've sat across from enough people to know that a lie this big isn't a strategy. It's a symptom. It's a life raft. And my first question wasn't going to be, why are you lying? It was going to be, what is it about your reality that is so painful you had to create a new one? Because that's where the truth always is. It's not in the details of the lie, it's in the reason the lie was born. As I dug into her history, talking to her and her mother separately, the picture started to become painfully clear. Jenna had always been a quiet, sensitive child, the younger of two sisters. Her older sister was the star of the family, academically gifted, athletic, popular. The kind of kid who just seemed to succeed effortlessly. It wasn't that her parents loved the older sister more, not in a malicious way, but their praise and attention naturally flowed toward the one who was constantly achieving. Jenna was just Jenna, the quiet one, the one who was good at art but never joined the clubs, the one who had a couple of friends but was never the center of a group. She lived in a constant suffocating shadow, not of cruelty, but of comparison. Every report card, every family dinner, every holiday letter was an implicit reminder of where she stood. She internalized this narrative. Early on, she was the lesser-than sister. The disappointment. She told me about a moment in middle school, a moment that might seem small to anyone else, but for her it was a defining trauma. She'd worked for weeks on a piece of art for the school fair and was incredibly proud of it. When her parents came, they glanced at it, said, "Oh, that's nice, honey," and then spent 20 minutes at her sister's science project, which had won a blue ribbon. She described standing there next to her forgotten painting and feeling a sense of shame so hot it felt like it was burning her from the inside out. In that moment, she decided it was better to be invisible than to be a disappointment. That feeling, that hot shame, became the soundtrack to her adolescence. She learned that the safest way to avoid judgment was to avoid participation. She didn't try out for the play, she didn't run for student council, she didn't enter any more art fairs. Her strategy was simple: if you don't put yourself out there, you can't be found lacking. This is a classic avoidance coping mechanism. It's a strategy that works in the short term. It absolutely protects you from the pain of failure or criticism. But in the long term, it's a self-imposed prison. You don't just avoid the pain, you avoid the joy, the growth, the connection, the entire human experience. You shrink your world until all that's left is a tiny, safe, and profoundly lonely room. Her high school years were a blur of mediocrity, not because she lacked ability, but because she lacked the courage to try. She got B's and C's just enough to get by without drawing too much attention. She was present, but she was absent. Then came college. This was supposed to be a fresh start, a place where no one knew her as the lesser-than sister. But she carried that identity with her like a suitcase full of rocks. She was overwhelmed. The social dynamics, the academic pressure, it was a constant high-stakes performance that she felt completely unequipped for. She'd sit in a lecture hall of 200 students and feel a crushing sense of anonymity, which was quickly followed by a terror that someone might actually call on her, see her, and find her wanting. The creation of Aria wasn't a grand, premeditated scheme. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon after she'd skipped a class because she was too anxious to walk into the room. She was scrolling through a design blog and saw an anonymous comment section. On a whim, she created a username, Aria. It sounded elegant, strong. Someone commented on a post and she replied as Aria, offering a surprisingly sharp and witty critique of a logo design. Another user praised her comment, calling it insightful. And there it was, a little spark, a flicker of validation from a complete stranger. It was anonymous, it was safe, and it felt good. That little spark became a fire. She created a simple private profile on a social media platform using the name Aria. At first it had no picture, just a few posts about art and design. She followed other designers, joined groups, and participated in discussions. As Aria, she wasn't Jenna, the quiet, anxious girl from a small town. She was articulate, she was confident. The fear of saying the wrong thing, of being judged, it just wasn't there because Aria wasn't real. If someone disagreed with Aria, it didn't hurt Jenna. It was like wearing armor. The lie began to grow organically. Someone asked where she was from. She panicked and picked a city she'd always dreamed of visiting. Someone asked what she did for a living. Freelance graphic designer. She typed, her heart pounding. The positive feedback was addictive. Every like, every follow, every complimentary message was a hit of the dopamine she was starving for in her real life. It was a powerful reinforcement loop. The more she invested in Aria, the more validation she received, and the more validation she received, the more her real life as Jenna paled in comparison. The stolen photos came next. It was a huge escalation, a conscious step across a moral line. An online friend of Aria's wanted to see what she looked like. Jenna spent days in a state of panic before she found a public profile of a lifestyle blogger who looked vaguely like how she imagined Aria, stylish, confident, living a life full of beautiful cafes and interesting friends. She saved one photo, then another and another. Each time she posted one, her stomach was in knots, but the compliments would pour in: "You're beautiful," "I love your style," "Your life looks amazing," and the anxiety would be washed away by a wave of acceptance. She was getting all the affirmation she craved without any of the real-world risk. She was curating a perfect existence, and people were buying it. The problem is, she was buying it too. This is where the psychological wires get crossed in a really dangerous way. The brain starts to have trouble distinguishing between the source of the good feelings. Her real life, the life of Jenna, was a source of anxiety, failure, and shame. Her fake life, the life of Aria, was a source of confidence, success, and admiration. Which world do you think she's going to choose to live in? It's not even a conscious choice after a while. It's a survival instinct. She was medicating her social anxiety and depression with a fantasy. And like any addiction, she started needing a bigger and bigger dose to get the same effect. The lie had to become more detailed, more elaborate to sustain the feeling. This, of course, is when her real world began to completely disintegrate. She dropped out of her classes. Why struggle for a C in a class she hated when she could get praise from a client for a fictional logo she designed as Aria? She stopped seeing the few friends she had. Their lives, with their real-world problems and small, authentic joys, seemed boring and threatening compared to the glamorous world she inhabited online. Her mother, Sarah, saw her daughter disappearing before her very eyes. The vibrant, if quiet, young woman was being replaced by a ghost who lived in a dark room, her face illuminated only by a screen. The escalation began, as it so often does, with money. Sarah and her husband were still supporting Jenna, paying for her car, her phone, the roof over her head. They thought her withdrawal was a phase, a bout of post-college depression. They gently encouraged her to look for a job to go back to school, but Jenna always had an excuse. "I'm working on my portfolio," she'd say, which was true in a way. She was working on Aria's portfolio. "I'm doing some freelance projects online." She'd claim a statement that was a complete fabrication but felt real to her because Aria was getting so much positive feedback in her design groups. The first major confrontation happened when Sarah found a credit card bill. Jenna had ordered expensive art supplies, high-end markers, specialty paper, a new graphics tablet. Sarah was furious. "You're not in school. You don't have a job. What is all this for?" Jenna, cornered, fell back on her only defense, the lie. She insisted it was for a big freelance project for a new client. She spun a detailed story about a branding package for a boutique coffee shop. She was so convincing, so desperate for her mother to believe her, that Sarah backed down, albeit with a healthy dose of suspicion. But you can't maintain a lie of this magnitude without cracks starting to show. Sarah became a detective in her own home. She noticed Jenna was up all night, sleeping half the day. She heard her on the phone, her voice different, more animated, more confident. It was the Aria voice. One day, Sarah was cleaning Jenna's room and saw her laptop was open. She saw the profile, Aria's profile. She saw the pictures of the stranger, the life that wasn't hers, the comments from people who believed this person was her daughter. Sarah described that moment to me as a physical blow. It wasn't just anger. It was a profound sense of betrayal and confusion. Who was this person her daughter was pretending to be, and why? She printed out pages from the profile and confronted Jenna. That was the first time the conflict truly exploded. It wasn't a discussion, it was a war. Jenna, when faced with the hard evidence, didn't confess. She doubled down. She screamed, she cried, she accused her mother of spying, of violating her privacy. This is a classic deflection tactic. When the content of the accusation is too painful to address, you attack the process. It's not about what I did, it's about how you found out. Jenna accused her mother of never understanding her, of always favoring her sister, of constantly judging her. All of which had a kernel of truth, and that's what makes these family fights so destructive. The accusations are laced with just enough reality to be potent weapons. She used her pain as a shield and a sword. She wasn't just defending Aria, she was defending the only place she felt good about herself. To her, her mother wasn't trying to help, she was trying to destroy the one thing that made her feel alive. The fight fractured their relationship. They were living under the same roof, but they were miles apart, communicating only in clipped, angry sentences or a thick, heavy silence. Jenna retreated even further into her online world. Aria got a promotion. Aria adopted a cat with pictures sourced from a pet adoption website. Aria even began a serious online romance with a man named Mark who lived 1,000 miles away. He was an architect, and he fell for Aria's wit, her creativity, her seemingly perfect life. He would talk to her on the phone for hours, hearing that confident Aria voice, never knowing the terrified young woman on the other end of the line was huddled in her childhood bed. The situation reached its breaking point when Mark announced he wanted to visit. He was booking a plane ticket. He wanted to see her city, meet her friends, see her loft. This was the one thing the fantasy couldn't sustain a collision with reality. Jenna panicked. She went into a complete tailspin. She couldn't eat, she couldn't sleep. The lie was about to implode, and it was going to take her down with it. She tried to put him off, making excuses about a big project at work, a sick relative. But Mark was persistent. He loved Aria, and he wanted to finally be with her. It was in this state of absolute crisis that Sarah, seeing her daughter unraveling, made the call to our show. She saw it as a last resort. She didn't know how to get through to Jenna. She had tried anger, she had tried pleading, she had tried ignoring it. Nothing worked. The lie was bigger and stronger than her love. She felt she had to bring in an outside force to break through the wall Jenna had built around herself. That's a position no parent ever wants to be in. To feel so helpless that you have to expose your family's deepest wounds to the world in a final desperate attempt to save your child. That's the level of desperation we were dealing with when they walked onto my stage. When they sat down on the stage, the tension between them was palpable. It was like a third person sitting on the couch. Sarah was coiled tight, ready to spring, to list every lie, every deception. Jenna was the complete opposite. She was a black hole of energy, absorbing everything, giving nothing back. She wouldn't make eye contact with me or her mother or the audience. Her focus was on her own hands, twisting them in her lap. My first job wasn't to attack the lie. It was to bypass the fortress and speak to the prisoner inside. I started gently. I turned to Jenna and I said, "Jenna, I've read everything your mother sent. I've heard her side, but I'm not interested in that right now. I'm interested in you. Tell me about Aria. Who is she?" That question seemed to surprise her. She was expecting a confrontation, an accusation. Instead, I asked her to talk about her creation. Her eyes flickered up at me for a half second, a glimmer of something, curiosity, maybe even relief. She mumbled, She's a designer." "Okay," I said, leaning forward. "A designer. Is she good at it?" She nodded almost imperceptibly. "Yeah, she's really good." "What makes her good?" I pressed. "What does she have that allows her to be successful?" For the first time, her voice had a bit of life in it. "She's not afraid." Jenna said the words barely a whisper. "She's confident. She can share her ideas and not worry about what people will think. If they don't like it, it doesn't crush her." Right there. That was the core of it. Crush her. A word choice that speaks volumes. Failure for Jenna wasn't a setback. It was an annihilation of self. But for Aria, it was just feedback. I continued down this path, asking about Aria's friends, her apartment, her life. With every question, Jenna became slightly more animated, describing this fictional world with a longing that was heartbreaking. She wasn't describing a lie, she was describing her own unmet needs. The need for competence, for connection, for autonomy, for a sense of self-worth. Aria was a meticulously crafted collage of everything Jenna felt she was missing. Her mother, Sarah, was getting more and more agitated. She kept trying to interrupt. "But it's not real. She stole those photos. She's lying to that poor man." I had to hold up a hand and stop her. "Sarah, I know. We all know it's not real. But right now we need to understand why the fake life feels more real to her than her own. Yelling at her that it's a lie is like yelling at a starving person for eating junk food. It doesn't solve the hunger." That's when I turned back to Jenna and shifted my tone. It was time to introduce reality, but not as an attack. I said, "Jenna, you've created a beautiful life for Aria, a life where she is safe and admired and successful. It's a testament to your creativity and your deep desire for these things. But here's the problem. Aria is getting all the rewards, and Jenna is paying all the bills. Aria gets the compliments and Jenna gets the anxiety. Aria gets the online boyfriend and Jenna has to live with the terror of him showing up at her door. Every bit of energy you pour into Aria's life is energy you are stealing from your own. You are starving yourself to feed a ghost. You could see the conflict on her face, her brow furrowed. The wall of silence was starting to crack. This is the critical moment in a breakthrough. It's when the person's own logic starts to work against the delusion. They can't deny the truth in what you're saying. The fantasy is safe, but it has a cost. And the bill was coming due. This man, Mark, I continued, he's not in love with a stranger's photos and a fake career. He's in love with the things you put into Aria. Your wit, your insights on art, your sense of humor. That's all you, Jenna. The best parts of Aria came from Jenna, but you've convinced yourself that those qualities can only exist in this fictional character. You've given all your power, all your best attributes to a shadow. Tears started to well up in her eyes. It was the first real vulnerable emotion she had shown. Sarah saw it too, and her own expression softened from anger to anguish. Let's be very clear about what's going on here. I said, my voice firm but not unkind. This isn't about being a catfish. This isn't about being lazy. This is about a terror of failure so profound that you have opted out of your own life. You have pre-failed. You've decided that it's better to succeed at a fake life than to risk failing at a real one. But look at me, Jenna. You are failing. You are failing at the one job we all have, which is to live our own authentic life. That's when she broke. Not loudly, but a quiet, shattering sob. She covered her face with her hands and her shoulders shook. I don't know how, she whispered through her tears. I don't know how to be me. I've never been good enough. And there it was, the foundational lie. Not the lie about being Aria, but the lie she had been telling herself since she was a little girl standing next to a forgotten painting. I am not good enough. Every action, every choice, her entire retreat from the world was built on that one toxic belief. Aria wasn't a lie. She was the inevitable conclusion of that belief. I let her cry for a moment. You have to let that pain come out. It's been locked away for too long. Then I looked at Sarah. Mum, I said, this is where you come in. She didn't learn this in a vacuum. She has felt less than her whole life. Did you ever for a moment stop celebrating the blue ribbons long enough to see the beautiful painting right next to it? The question hit Sarah hard. You could see the years of unintentional neglect flash across her face. Her own tears began to fall. I never meant to, she stammered. I love her. I was just so proud of her sister. I thought she knew. She didn't, I said, my voice gentle again. She thought the message was achieve or you are invisible. This isn't about blaming you. This is about understanding the pattern. A pattern that ends today, right here. I turned back to Jenna. Her sobs had subsided into sniffles. She was looking at me now, her eyes red but clear. Jenna, I said, the cure for this is not on a screen. The cure is action. Terrifying, risky, real-world action. And the first action is the hardest. You have to kill Aria. The words hung in the air. You have to kill Aria. I let her absorb the full weight of that statement. For her, this wasn't just about deleting a social media profile. It was a call to dismantle the entire psychological structure she had built to survive. It was like I was asking her to step out of a bomb shelter during an air raid. She is a parasite. I continued, making sure my language was direct and unambiguous. Aria is feeding on your future. She is consuming your time, your energy, and your potential. The longer you keep her alive, the weaker Jenna becomes. There is not enough room in one life for the two of you. One of you has to go, and I'm telling you, it can't be you. She was shaking her head, a reflexive, terrified motion. I can't, she whispered. Mark. Ah, yes, Mark, I said, leaning in. Let's talk about Mark. You feel like you're going to break his heart, don't you? You feel like you've done a terrible thing to him, and you have. You've deceived him. But let's be honest about what's really scaring you. You aren't just afraid of hurting Mark. You're afraid of losing the validation he gives you. He is Aria's biggest achievement. And you're terrified that if he knew the real Jenna, he wouldn't want her. Am I wrong? She couldn't answer. She just looked down, tears dripping onto her hands. That silence was her confession. It's a common pattern. People who feel they have no value will seek it externally, and when they find it, they will protect that source at all costs, even if it's based on a complete falsehood. So here is your first terrifying, liberating step toward having a real life I laid out for her. Tonight, you are going to call Mark. Not text, not email. You are going to call him with your mother there to support you. And you are going to tell him the truth, the whole truth. You're going to say, "My name is Jenna. The person you've been talking to is a character I created because I was too scared to be myself. The pictures aren't me. The life isn't mine. I am deeply sorry for deceiving you." You owe him that, but more importantly, you owe it to yourself. That's the sound of the prison door unlocking. Her whole body recoiled at the suggestion. The fear was visceral. "He'll hate me," she said, her voice trembling. "He might." I agreed, refusing to sugarcoat it. "He has every right to be angry and hurt. He might hang up on you and you'll never hear from him again. That is a very real possibility, and you will have to sit in that discomfort. You will have to survive that rejection, because your self-worth cannot be dependent on the approval of a man who doesn't even know who you are. Your recovery starts with accepting the consequences of your own actions. That's called integrity." I turned to her mother. "Sarah, your job in that moment is not to fix it. It's not to say, 'Oh, it's okay, honey.' Your job is to sit next to her while she does the hardest thing she's ever done. And when he hangs up or yells or whatever he does, you're just going to be there. You're going to let her feel the pain, and you're going to remind her that she is still loved, not for her achievements, but for her, for Jenna." This was the blueprint for the outcome. It wasn't a magic wand. There was no easy fix. The outcome depended entirely on Jenna's willingness to walk through that fire. I've been doing this long enough to know you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I can give them the tools, the insights, the roadmap, but they have to choose to take the first step. We provided her with a therapist who specialized in social anxiety and identity issues, someone she could start seeing immediately. We talked about small, concrete steps she could take. Re-enrolling in one class at the community college, just one. Not for the grade, but for the act of showing up, going for a walk outside every day, reaching out to one old friend, not to apologize for everything, but just to say hello. These are behavioral activations. You can't think your way into better acting, you have to act your way into better thinking. Her feelings of inadequacy weren't going to vanish overnight. She had to build a new portfolio of evidence, real-world evidence that she was capable. The show ended as it always does. The cameras stop rolling, the lights go down, and the real work begins. We followed up, of course. The first few days were brutal. Jenna did make the call to Mark. Her mother told us it was the most painful hour of their lives. He was, as predicted, devastated and furious. He felt foolish and betrayed. He said some very harsh things and ended the call. And Jenna fell apart. This is the point where many people would retreat right back into the fantasy. The pain of reality is too sharp, too immediate. The temptation to resurrect Aria or some new version of her would be immense. Sarah, to her credit, followed the plan. She didn't try to minimize Jenna's pain. She just sat with her. She listened. She held her while she cried. For the first time, Jenna was experiencing a massive emotional consequence in the real world, and her support system didn't break. Her mother didn't say, "I told you so." She said, "I'm here." That was the turning point. Surviving that rejection, as agonizing as it was, proved something to Jenna on a subconscious level. She could withstand pain. She didn't disintegrate. The world didn't end. She had faced the worst possible outcome of her confession, and she was still there. It was a painful but powerful inoculation against her fear. Slowly, tentatively, she began to engage with the plan. She deleted all of Aria's profiles. an act that she described as feeling like a part of her was dying. She started therapy. She enrolled in a single pottery class, something she'd always wanted to do but was too intimidated to try. It was hands-on, creative, and low pressure. It was perfect. She was terrified the first day, but she went, and the second day she went again. Her progress wasn't a straight line. There were days she didn't want to get out of bed, days where the shame and regret were overwhelming, but she kept showing up. The small successes started to build on each other. She made a lopsided bowl in her pottery class, and instead of seeing it as a failure, she saw it as a starting point. She started sketching again, just for herself, filling a notebook with her own ideas, not Aria's. About 6 months after the show, we got an email from her. It wasn't a dramatic "my life is perfect now" kind of letter. It was something far more authentic and, to me, far more meaningful. She wrote that it was the hardest 6 months of her life. She said she still felt the pull of wanting to escape into a fantasy, especially on bad days, but she was learning to sit with the discomfort instead of running from it. She was still in her pottery class and was surprisingly good at it. The tangible nature of creating something with her own hands, something real that she could hold, was profoundly therapeutic. She had even sold a few pieces at a local craft fair. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but that wasn't the point. The point was that she, Jenna, had created something and someone else had valued it enough to pay for it. It was a small real-world transaction of validation, and it meant more to her than all the thousands of likes Aria had ever received. Her relationship with her mother had undergone a seismic shift. It was still complicated, as all family relationships are, but the foundation had changed. They were learning to talk to each other not as a judge and a defendant, but as two people trying to understand each other. Sarah was making a conscious effort to praise Jenna's effort, not just her results. She was learning to see her younger daughter for who she was, not who she wasn't. Jenna, in turn, was learning to express her feelings and her needs directly instead of letting them fester into resentment or escape into fiction. There was a line in her email that has stuck with me ever since. She wrote, "I'm not Aria. I'm not confident and witty, and I don't live in a cool loft. I'm just Jenna. I'm quiet, I get anxious, and I make lopsided bowls. But for the first time, I think that might be okay." That right there is the entire goal. It's not about turning the quiet, anxious person into a life-of-the-party extrovert. It's not about transforming them into their fantasy persona. It's about radical self-acceptance. It's about getting to a place where you can look at your own authentic, imperfect self in the mirror and say, "You know what? This is enough. I am enough." This story isn't a fairy tale. Jenna didn't magically become a world-famous artist overnight. Mark never called back. There are scars from that period of her life that will likely never fully fade. The temptation to retreat from the world is probably a battle she will have to fight in some form for the rest of her life. But now she has weapons. She has coping strategies. She has a support system. She has proof earned through painful experience that she is strong enough to live in the real world. What her case illustrates so powerfully is that these big dramatic dysfunctions, these elaborate online hoaxes, these secret lives, they almost always grow from a very small, very common seed of pain. For Jenna, it was the feeling of being less than. For someone else, it might be a fear of abandonment, a deep-seated shame, or a trauma from their past. The behavior is just a symptom, a desperate, misguided attempt to solve that core problem. You don't fix the problem by just stopping the behavior. If you had just taken away Jenna's computer, you wouldn't have solved anything. You would have just removed her only coping mechanism, leaving her alone with all that pain. The real work is to turn around and face the original wound. You have to go back to that moment, the little girl standing by the painting, and rewrite the narrative she told herself. The old narrative was, "My work isn't good enough, therefore I am not good enough." The new narrative has to be, "My value is not determined by a blue ribbon. My worth is inherent. I am enough just as I am." It's a simple thing to say, but it's the hardest work a human being can do, to unlearn a lifetime of negative self-talk. to choose authenticity over the seductive comfort of a lie. Jenna started that work. She chose to kill the ghost she was feeding so that she could finally start to nourish herself. And that choice, that painful, courageous choice, is where a real life begins. It's not about being perfect, it's about being present in your own story, imperfections and all.